All right. So it's that time of year where you're starting to think about summer work and maybe internships or how you're going to spend your time after the semester ends. And so in this unit, we're going to talk about some aspects of professional development. So we'll look at resumes and letter recommendations and even getting on LinkedIn. So, uh, perhaps some of you have had to write resumes for different jobs thus far. But really, one of the things that is important to realize in our field, especially in the sciences, is that resumes as well as CVs or curriculum vitae are pretty common and standard. But there are some differences between the two. And for students that are starting out in their academic career with not a lot of work experience, you're going to start with a resume. But let's look at what the differences are. A resume is really a list of your experiences, skills, your education, and typically can, tailored to whatever position you're applying for. A CV or curriculum vitae is often what a scientist will use or those that are in academics will prepare. And it's a longer document that is really keying in on your research, your publications, your related experiences to presenting at conferences, book chapters, those kinds of things. But a resume is really written for a possible employer, or most commonly, the first person to see it when you're applying for a job is HR. Although sometimes for graduate school, you'll also have to provide a resume. Uh, so it might be whoever is hiring you in that arena as well. A CV is more tailored to fellow academics and a hiring committee, and usually is after you've accumulated lots of work experience and finished your bachelor's degree. And because of that, the resume is really meant to be short and sweet, not longer than a page. If it has to be more than a page, like a page and a half, CV can be long. Mine is about 8 pages, and it includes everything from funding that I've received, awards that I've received, my teaching experience, research experience, all of that. And that's pretty much true across the board for most people in their later uh, career path. I will say that one of the jobs that I had when I was in college was to work for a company called Abiomed. And Abiomed is a company that made the first bionic heart. It's instead of having to use like cardiac bypass, it was meant to be more like an electronic heart that pumped inside the body while the patient waited for a heart transplant. I didn't get to do any of the cool science. I didn't even step foot in any of those labs. My job was to work on the HR side, and my job was to look at resumes. So I spent a lot of time seeing what good resumes and poor resumes looked like. So part of what we're going to do today is go over some of the do's and the don'ts. Okay. A resume is meant to be a snapshot of you. You can brag about yourself a little bit. I know sometimes it's easy to think, oh, what can I say about myself that feels real? Sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. But the resume should be simple, clear, skimmable. You're essentially writing out who you are and bite-sized chunks that somebody could just look at briefly. They're going to spend about 30 seconds to a minute looking at your resume. Can they learn enough about you in that time frame to figure out if you're a worthy candidate or not? CV, they'll spend longer time reading through, but it should still essentially be the same, simple, clear, and skimmable. But you're basically thinking for the person that's hiring you and trying to show them why you are desirable for that role. So, when you're building a resume, you're going to start with your education and you're going to go in reverse chronological order. That is what you are working on right now for your degree, is what you start with. So, Indiana Wesleyan. And if you haven't graduated yet, you put your anticipated graduation date and you can literally write anticipated graduation date, May 2026 or May 2027 or whatever the date that you are anticipating. You can also put what your degree is. Is it a biology major, chemistry major? Do you have a minor or a specialization? And if you have a desirable GPA, and that is really kind of subjective, but I'd say anything that's over a 3.5 is something that you can put in your resume. Not to say that if your GPA is lower than that, not putting it means that it's lower, but that if you do have a high GPA, it's fine to put it and fine to brag about it. What is not included in your education section is your high school experience. I mean, unless you went to a really fancy prep school and you're applying for a job at that very fancy prep school, it really doesn't matter at this point. Your highest degree is what matters. Then you're going to put your work experience. Some of you may have or have had jobs, maybe in the summer or during the school year. And really, a resume is meant to be tailored in such a way that you highlight two things. One, you are employable. Two, that you have related work experience. You might be sitting there thinking, I don't actually have one of those. Or maybe you don't have either of those. And we'll come back to it if you don't have work experience yet. But in general, I would presume that many of you do. And so you're going to list out, again, a reverse chronological order from present day back, probably 5 years, like through high school. Any jobs that you've been paid for, their title, where you worked, then the length of time. If you have worked in a lab, if you have worked in a hospital, you would probably put that into a category called related work experience. And then maybe you worked as a barista, maybe you were a waiter, maybe you did lawn care. Those are other work experiences that you do want to highlight. I am employable. So you might want to separate them into two subheadings, one being related experience, and then after that, other work experience. If you've presented or have posters from Hodson Colloquium, Springs Colloquium, you can list those. If you've gotten any academic honors, awards, grants, fellowships, you can also include those with as much information, the year, the date, the length of time, all of that. You also want to think about tailoring it for each role. It might be overkill to have a really solid science focused resume for, say, a babysitting job. But if you have a resume that's tailored for a babysitting job and you're applying for a biotech position, that also won't do. So you want to make sure you're tailoring it for the role. You want to think about what skills you have. And I will say that a lot of times students want to show that they are marketable, and maybe you've done some Western blots, or you've run some ELISA, or you've run a sample on the HPLC, or you've done cell culture. Unless you are proficient in it enough that you could do it by yourself without anybody helping you, I would not list those as skills. The other would be, I see sometimes putting in there in that section that you are like in experience in social media. I would only put that if you absolutely have experience running somebody else's social media platform, not your own, because it looks completely different to capture somebody else's vision for their organization or even themselves, and do that well versus you are the expert of you. So keep that in mind. If you have other things like you're a professional photographer or you are experienced in microscopy, yeah, sure, put those things if you are proficient at it. You want to use assertive and positive language when you describe the activities and the role that you played for the job, but you also want to use past tense, so developed, organized, achieved. And in that job description, you really just want to use 1 to 2 bullet points. Anything more than that is too much. Oftentimes, I'm really helping students pare it down. Every time you get a new job or a new accolade, do update your resume. I'm going to post a sample resume for you to fill in. It doesn't have to be Pinterest pretty. This is just a template, a place to start. Note a couple of things. Your name is at the top. You can put your home address, you can put your IW address. Either way is fine. Then you're going to put your work experience, your professional or related experience. If you have volunteer experience, great. Another key point is to put your references available upon request. You don't have to put your referees on your resume. You can make them available when you are asked for them. So for your assignment, you're going to develop a resume and I'm going to look at it and give you feedback. There's other ways to get feedback on your resume in that you can bring it to the Career Center and have them look at it. They may be looking for different things than say somebody in the sciences are, but in general, all of this pretty much holds true across the board. Now, a lot of times we ask students for a resume when you're asking for a letter of recommendation. So I wanted to talk about what letter of recommendation requests look like and what you should be prepared to do. So thinking about who's going to write that letter for you, have a resume or like highlight the things that you're good at. Again, if you don't have a lot of work experience and your resume looks a little bit slim, you can highlight the things that you're doing well on campus and in your academic career to somebody writing you a letter of recommendation. Then you're going to write a letter asking for a letter, and you're going to remind them of when it's due and thank them in advance. You also want to give them time. You can't just ask today and expect a letter tomorrow. You also need to feel out the person. Talking to them in person is the best way to go because you can sense if there's any hesitation in saying yes. But you should also be thinking about, is this person going to write me a strong letter or recommendation? What are they going to say about me? How do they know me? In what context? Because you might think they might have tons of things to say about you, but their perspective on you might not be the same. So it also helps to tell them the context of what you're needing a letter for. Is it for a job? Is it for an internship? What you're hoping will be highlighted in the letter. It's not cheating to tell them those things. So go ahead and be as open and as clear with what you need from that letter. And ask them if they can write you a strong letter recommendation, because that means it's a positive and good letter. I've seen plenty of letters of recommendation that are just so, and that doesn't really help you at all to get that job. So you want to make sure that you're asking referees that will give you a good letter of recommendation. So when you ask and either in person then follow up or send an email, you want to include your resume, what you're applying for, remind them of how they know you and what they're going to say about you, and tell them when the letters are due. If there's more than one application, you're going to want to give them a list and like a little outline. Make it as easy for that person as possible. There have been times where I've had students ask if they can write a letter, if I will write a letter of recommendation for them. And I've turned it over on them and said, can you write a letter about yourself? And they've had to write their own letter recommendation, and I review it. That's a little intimidating. I don't often ask that, but you might find that your letter writer might ask you to write your own letter, and then they will go from there. So keep that in mind when you're writing, asking for a letter of recommendation. The other platform that maybe isn't highly utilized by students, but I want to expose you to, is LinkedIn. Some of you may have an account. You can go ahead and find me and maybe some other faculty that are on there. But LinkedIn is an awesome resource. It was started almost a decade ago, and there's many users around the world. And it's really never too soon to develop a professional online presence, because you have an online presence more than likely, but you want to make sure that if people are Googling you, this is what's going to pop up when it comes to jobs. And it's not just for jobs. It could be to find REUs, internships, connect with others, find volunteer opportunities, and network. So when you're setting up your account, it's very similar to other social media platforms where you have like a bio and a profile picture and all of that. You want to make sure that it's professional. You do not want a vacation selfie of you on the beach. You want it to be with a plain background and professional attire. You do not need to pay for a headshot, but just make sure that is a professionally uh, nice picture. And there's also like a title sort of heading picture that you can put up there as well. Then if you've written your resume, you can pretty much just plug in the information into the other categories and find people that you know and friend them. This is the only platform that I would say you could also friend people that you don't know, or like organizations that you've never been a part of, because this is a way to grow that network in a like, this is an okay, normal way to go about doing it, and it's not weird. Okay, my profile looks like this, and you can find me and add me and add any other faculty that might be there that you know. Um, and in general, when you're posting things through social media or on LinkedIn, you want to think about your audience, right? Your employers are going to Google you. They're going to find you on LinkedIn if you're there. So you want that to be positive. Also, when you're writing your resume, you never want to include a photo of yourself because that can increase bias. But know that more than likely they're going to look at you on LinkedIn. So you want to make sure that that's a positive and accurate representation of you. But think twice before you post anything that you think might be questionable. You want to represent yourself well, as well as your institution and yourself positively to your future employer. But again, you can friend your faculty and other students and make a good impression that way. Okay, so for the assignments, you're going to create a resume, and I have a worksheet that goes along with this talk that you're going to fill those out and submit those for class next week. Thanks.